Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking an interest. Hi there. Thanks for everyone who meditated with me through the day, I guess. And thanks for those who sent me little presents, secret presents through Lucas. Not sure what else to say.
How does it feel to talk?
It feels a bit weird, actually. I had a lot of insights in there, I guess. One of them was that I was essentially inside a little room, and my only two companions were the passage of time and my own thoughts. I'll try to project that. But when we're outside the dome, we're also still in little rooms, and we still have those same two companions, the passage of time and our own thoughts. So the only difference was what I had in the room with me.
What is he doing?
Outside the dome, you had many more things in the room with you.
What is that tire?
So I get and the things that I had in the room with me were a few little books that were about the passage of time and my own thoughts. That's all they were about. So I guess my most first and fundamental insight was the things we have in the little rooms when we're outside the dome are all designed to divert our attention from the passage of time and our own thoughts. Because if we're aware of them for too long, we suffer. And it causes suffering. If we are aware of the passage of time for too long, we call that boredom. But why should we suffer if we're aware of our own thoughts? And why should we suffer if we're aware of the passage of time? And so I guess what I worked out with myself is the passage, being aware of the passage of time for too long causes suffering because life is basically time on earth. And if we want more life, we're just asking for more time on earth. But we don't actually know what to do with our lives. We don't know what life's for. So if we're aware of the passage of time, we've got excess life, which we don't know what it's for. And we call that boredom, but it's actually just freaking out because it's an existential freak out. So we quickly put on a DVD or we turn the radio on or we look at our phones. Boredom is a massive, fundamental existential freak out, but because we only tolerate it for a few seconds, we don't notice that it is. So that's one of the things that, that's one of the aspects. And so why should our own thoughts cause suffering? Our own thoughts cause suffering because if we're with them without any external stimulation for long enough, the first thing we realise is that we have no control over them. And so we're not free, we're prisoners, and that causes suffering. So I was in there alone with those two companions that just caused suffering. The books, the reason why I had those books is because they provided me with the tools on how to overcome that suffering. And the religious aesthetics would always say voluntary suffering is the way to the divine. And what they mean by voluntary suffering is simply to face those two companions, passage of time and enduring thoughts. And at first it's voluntary suffering. But if you have the tools, then they don't cause suffering anymore. And those tools are practices like prayer and yoga, which are essentially finding out what thought is, what the mind is, what the self is, and then engaging with the mind and freeing yourself from it so that you're not its prisoner. Constant prayer or mantras in the Eastern way is like putting lights on a path for the mind to follow, or a railroad for a train to follow, so the mind is no longer completely pulling you everywhere. Also, when daydreams start to grow, a new prayer will cut it like a sword, and then it'll start to grow again, and then it'll cut it like a sword, and it'll grow again, and it'll cut it like a sword. And when this warrior who's cutting them gets tired, you have to change prayers to a new, fresh guy. Cut it. So what you become aware of is that you're not your mind, you're something that's watching it. If you try to stop the scissors from cutting, the scissors' whole nature is to cut. That's what it's designed for. And so when people say, when you're meditating, you've got to stop your mind. Your mind's whole design is to think. So it's going against its nature to stop it from thinking. The thing to do is not stop the scissors from cutting, is to realize you're not the scissors, but you're the hand that holds the scissors. You can let go of the scissors. Or you can cut something constructively that you want to cut. So in that process, I engaged in the practices in the book, thank you, and in the books, and I had one book there which was just for relief, which was the fairy tale book. The other big insight is fatigue. So all these things that I said to you, as effective as they were, they brought fatigue on very fast. And so when I got fatigued, I would have to have lots of sleeps or sleep a really long time because I wasn't used to that level of putting myself in there. And so reading to an extent was a relief from that. I guess another insight is that being a mystic is like being a boxer. A boxer is a scientist and a guinea pig at the same time. He goes into the ring, and because he's in the ring, he's forced by absolute subjectivity to find the most efficient method, to find the truth. If he doesn't, he'll get knocked onto the canvas. It's subjectivity that helps the boxer strive and aspire and get better. The mystic, it's the same. You are a scientist and a guinea pig at the same time. And in that sense, it's the spiritual person who believes in evolution and aspiring. The materialist only believes in evolution if they don't have to do anything. If you know what I mean. Objectivity is a comfortable couch, and natural selection is something over there. I guess, yeah. Does anyone have any other questions?
What are you doing now? What are you going to do now? What's the first thing you'll do?
I'm going to Disneyland. I'm going to go hang out with my ma.
Oh, nice.
Levin, you sorry, I'm up here. You wrote not on the walls, the texts about what you were doing and why you were doing it. Having done it, have you changed your mind about the things that you wrote prior to
I definitely got a better understanding of the things I wrote. not sure. I'll get back to you on it. I can't remember what I wrote. Just trying to get grants.
In a nutshell, what's your main thing that you've learned while being in there?
My main thing that I've learned, I guess, is it's good to... Creativity is one thing, but also suffer voluntarily. Put yourself on the line for what you're creating. Live a life of daring, I guess, is what I'm saying. In that same thing about subjectivity, if we worship reason alone, we won't have any more daring, because everything's about probability and what's reasonable and what's safe. Anybody else?
Congratulations, Levin. And
Thank you,
I
Deb.
just had a question about whether there was a prayer or mantra that you favoured. Like, was there one that you just kept on repeating the most?
They kind of changed in the beginning. They were much more traditional. As I read books or as I needed them, they changed. So there was no one favourite. I spent a whole day saying, "May I be worthy of the Lion of Heaven," which means nothing to anyone, but that had a lot of personal meaning to me. Sometimes I'd say, "I am a shared space." Sometimes there would be a sentence that didn't mean much but meant a lot to me at the time because of what I needed. Someone has a question?
I have a practical question. Did you actually lose track of time, and did somebody signal to you that it was time to come out, or did you know?
Yeah, time to come out now?
No, but your time in the dome. Did you actually know how many days you'd been there, how many days were
I lost
left,
track
or
of
were you?
days. I often got the day wrong, but I mostly was generally aware of what time of day it was because I wanted a fairly structured routine because that helps a lot to have a fairly structured routine, which I read about prisoners in solitary confinement before I went in the day.
I need to say that you had a profound effect on a lot of people. I was a skeptic about this when you went in, slightly stressed about it, but I've seen people pray with you, meditate with you, bring you gifts, and also I have this, bring you prayers. I wasn't allowed to give this to you, so this is prayers from these ladies here. And what you taught me is that your silence was a lot louder than the words you were saying, and the power of the silence. So you've had a profound effect on me, basically. Thank you. Thank you, Levin.
Life is not worth living. After your month spent in the dome, have you found anything about the examined life that makes it worth living, or are they both equally bleak?
The examined life is very useful, but it needs to be examined in real time, like a boxer. The boxer doesn't go asleep into a fight and then examine what happened afterwards. He's aware in the ring in real time. So a very famous mystic saying is conscious labours and intentional sufferings, the two tools of life. So your labours aren't unconscious, they're conscious. And your sufferings are intentional. Because if you don't suffer intentionally by facing those two companions, you will suffer anyway, unintentionally. I just realised another insight was just I did not realise how physically taxing it would be in terms of my body sitting upright all the time. I had a very sore lower back and sore knees the whole time. And at some stage I thought, I can't sit any any way that's comfortable, I don't know how I can continue. But for some reason it worked out. So.
When you talk about having books inside the cocoon, did you have a digital device at all?
Olden day mobile to tell the time. It also had emergency numbers in case something happened that I needed, but it was effectively just a watch.
I passed by one time in the evening. It seemed like we were lying down with an iPad or something.
Did anyone see an iPad on the camera? Just want to check my Instagram pictures.
I have a question about the different sizes. Like sometimes there's more scratchings, and I was wondering if it was representative of how you felt on that day.
Not the sizes weren't, but the straightness were. If they were all bent everywhere, I was struggling. Also, I had to change. I'm left-handed, but I had to change to my right hand because my left hand seized up, and I got a pain around from holding the pen every day, and so I became right-handed halfway through. But the size was because Lucas and I were a little bit too cowboy sometimes. We didn't do the maths of how many marks I needed per page per day to make a mark. So if you notice on that side down the bottom, there's heaps of marks per page, and then up here, for example, there's not so many. Because after a while, Lucas came to me through the window and he was feeding me and said, "You're behind, you have to do this many panels per day." And that cracked, so I did less marks per page. So that's
I did notice it got more easy than it got
practical.
Regular. More regular.
Yeah.
He did 90,475 prayers all up.
Wow.
Jesus.
Count them.
He counted them.
I was here for 2 weeks,
How many?
90,475. Next
Wow.
time you should try for 100,000. I think you got it in you.
Alright, sure.
There's an average of 109 prayers on each docket. There's about 800 dockets. That's a statistic. Very interesting.
Would you do something similar to this again in the future?
Yes, but after rests, and if it was if I felt a valid artistic reason to, and that sort of thing.
So would you have any preference in ever doing it in a...
I mean, if I did this again, I would really prefer it if there was no specific time limit. Although I'd want to keep it to about a month, I wouldn't want the stress of making numbers per day, because that gets in the way of the religious aspect, the spiritual aspect.
Would you have a preference of doing it in a public setting versus doing it privately?
Well, I would love to do it privately, but that's not an art piece. Publicly, it's now a group meditation, and it's a work in the community. Maybe when I retire, I'll go to a cave and do it privately. Okay. Any other?
How did you feel with the relationship with the audience and the public, and do you
I did feel, like I said before, that it was like a group meditation because it was an event that we all witnessed, even from a different perspective, and whatever the effect is whatever the effect is. And that kind of felt good. I felt like I was part of something. The camera, I kind of didn't bother me. I did not feel self-conscious with the camera, really. But when people came in, especially in the beginning, I heard the door buzzer, I would feel self-conscious, and that would ruin my concentration. And then so I adopted a technique of not trying to put them out, but focusing on them when they came in to incorporate them. Like when you jump in the pool and it's too cold and then your body fixes to the temperature. They would jump in the pool and then I'd freak out and then I'd incorporate them. And then I was okay. So, yeah.
Any standout meals?
Standout meal with my Lisa's solid.
Just a follow-up question, gentlemen. If you're going to do it again, are you at the moment looking forward to it?
No. The long answer is no.
Sweet potato?
I don't know, halfway through, I couldn't stomach sweet potatoes. I don't know what I've always been able to pass. Halfway through, I told him no more sweet potatoes.
I always was suspicious of sweet
What do you most look forward to enjoying out now that you're out of it, back in the real world? What kind of things do you crave or look forward to?
Bear in mind there's children present.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not thinking far beyond, hanging out with my mother and brothers tonight. So I'll let you know after that. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I actually really want to see the sky.
Let's move it outside.
So, yeah.
Are there any more questions for Levin? I'm sure you